Over the centuries, few sailors were destined to have such an adventurous career as William Adams, the real-life Englishman who inspired the character of John Blackthorne in the Disney Plus TV show Shogun. Adams was the first Englishman to land in Japan. On this episode, we'll be going over his life and adventures in Japan. At the end of the video, I'll be sharing sites in Japan where you can see traces of his legacy, so stay tuned until the end of the video. My husband is a big fan of the show, so this episode is dedicated to him. If you find this video helpful, please don't forget to subscribe. Before we delve into Adam's real-life story, it's important to go over a little historical context of the relationship between Japan and European nations in the 16th century. As a result of the voyages of Vasco da Gama and other explorers, the Portuguese enjoyed a monopoly of trade with the Far East for a long time. In 1542, a Portuguese ship set sail from Siam, modern Thailand, with a cargo of goods on their way to China. They were caught in a typhoon, which blew them off their course, and they ended up landing in Japan. The inhabitants told the Portuguese that the land they were in was called Nippon, and they were allowed to leave unharmed. This was the first contact between Japan and Europeans. 6 years later, when the Portuguese missionaries and traders came back to Japan, they found considerable support for their undertaking. Christianity as well as trade increased rapidly in Japan, particularly in the port of Nagasaki, which was open to the Portuguese. Jesuits were even allowed to enter the country to carry on missionary activities. Towards the end of the 16th century, the English and the Dutch, looking to cut a piece of the trade pie for themselves, began to challenge the monopoly of the Portuguese in the Far East. In 1598, a fleet of 5 ships from the Dutch East India Company set sail for Japan. It was on the flagship of this fleet, named the Liefde, that a pilot major named William Adams sailed on. In April 1600, the Liefde reached the port of Bungo in Japan, what is today the port of Oita in Beppu. The crew was so weak after the long journey that only 5 men were able to walk. The captain of the ship being ill, Adams was chosen to explain the mission of the Dutch boat to the ruler of Japan. 5 days after landing, the Shogun sent several galleys to bring Adams to the court in Osaka. Meanwhile, Adams and the crew fell under the protectorship of the Lord of Bungo. A Jesuit from Nagasaki came with some Christian Japanese to act as interpreters. After arriving in Osaka, the Shogun subjected Adams to a thorough interrogation. The Portuguese, eager to maintain the trade monopoly in Japan, had told the Shogun's men that the Liefde was a ship full of thieves and robbers from various nations. However, Shogun Ieyasu paid little attention to the accusations of the Portuguese. Ieyasu questioned Adams himself, eager to understand the state of current political affairs in Europe. Adams described this encounter in a letter to his wife back in England.
Coming before the king, he viewed me well and seemed to be wonderfully favourable. He made many signs unto me, some of which I understood, and some I did not. In the end, there came one that could speak Portuguese. By him the king demanded of me of what land I was, and what moved us to come to his land, being so far off. I showed unto him the name of our country, and that our land had long sought out the East Indies, and desired friendship with all kings and potentates in way of merchandise, having in our land diverse commodities which these lands had not. Then he asked whether our country had wars. I answered him, Yea, with the Spaniards and Portugals, being in peace with all other nations. Further he asked me, in what did I believe? I said, in God, that made heaven and earth. He asked me divers other questions of things of religions and many other things, as what way we came to the country. Having a chart of the whole world, I showed him through the Strait of Magellan. At which he wondered, and thought me to lie. Thus, from one thing to another, I abode with him till midnight.
Shogun Ieyasu ordered the Liefde to be shipped from Bungo to Edo, where, severely damaged, it sank. Adams showed Shogun Ieyasu a chart he'd brought along with him to show him the route he'd taken to land in Japan. The Shogun was very impressed, as no other ship before had reached Japan by that route. He came to admire Adams for his nautical achievements and his great knowledge of mathematics. Impressed by Adams, the shogun informed the Portuguese that the European newcomers had done the Japanese no harm and would not be put to death. Consequently, Shogun Ieyasu ordered Adams and his companions to help his commander-in-chief to build Japan's first ever Western-style ship. According to Adams, the shogun came aboard to see it, and the sight of it gave him great content. Following this construction, Shogun Ieyasu frequently invited Adams to his castle. The other survivors of the Liefde were also rewarded with great favors and were allowed to pursue foreign trade. Most of them left Japan in 1605. However, Adams was not granted permission to leave Japan before 1613. Adams and Shogun Ieyasu enjoyed a great friendship. The shogun granted him the title of diplomatic and trade advisor, which came with great privileges. He also became the shogun's official interpreter before eventually becoming his personal advisor on all things related to Western powers and civilization. Once Adam had learned Japanese, he was granted access to the shogun at any time. The latter thought of him as a great engineer and mathematician. Although Adams had a wife and children back home in England, Shogun Ieyasu forbade him from leaving Japan. Shogun Ieyasu instead announced that William Adams was dead and would now be reborn as samurai Miura Anjin. He was ordered to serve the shogun permanently, holding the position of hatamoto, or batterman, a high prestige position as a direct retainer in the shogun's court. Adams was paid generously for his services and managed to send home money to his family back in England. Adams wrote about this:
God hath provided for me after my great misery.
Adams was posted at the harbor of Uruga, the usual point of entrance to Edo Bay, modern Tokyo. His job was dealing with the cargoes of foreign ships. Due to his high rank as a samurai, Adams was eventually allowed to remarry. Adams ended up marrying Oyuki, the daughter of a highway official. Together, they had 2 kids named Joseph and Susanna. Although years later he was eventually permitted to return to England, he chose to stay in Japan. Adams died in Japan on May 16, 1620, aged 55. He was buried in Nagasaki, where his grave marker can still be seen today. His children eventually disappeared from historical records, so no one knows what happened to them. Adams' legacy lives on today in modern Japan, where his memory is still celebrated. A town in Edo, modern Tokyo, Anjin-cho, located in modern Nihonbashi, was named for Adams, whose house was located there. He is celebrated every year on the 15th of June in Anjin-cho. A monument was also inaugurated in his memory in Kent, England in 1934, the town where he was from. If you travel to Japan and you're a fan of the TV show Shogun, make sure to visit Anjin-cho in Tokyo, as well as Adams' grave marker in the south of Japan in Nagasaki. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like, share, and comment on this video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.